US President Trump told King Charles III, who is on a 4-day visit with Queen Camilla, that the US has no closer friends than the British.
Prominent journalist Andrzej Poczobut has been released from jail in Belarus in a swap with Poland. French President Emmanuel Macron has called for the debate on decriminalizing abortion in Andorra to move forward during his visit of the microstates.
US President Donald Trump said on Tuesday that the United States has no closer friends than the British, as he welcomed Britain's King Charles III to the White House. The British King and Queen Camilla are on a 4-day visit, including the White House, to celebrate the country's 250th anniversary of independence from Britain.
Let us remember what has made our countries the two most exceptional nations the world has ever known. And together let us go forward with even stronger resolve to carry on our sacred devotion to liberty and to the traditions of excellence that have been our shared gift of all mankind.
The leaders will also hold talks in the Oval Office, and King Charles III will later address the US Congress. The visit comes at a particularly challenging moment for US-UK relations, as Trump has criticised UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer and the lack of his support over Trump's war on Iran by saying this is not Winston Churchill that we're dealing with.
Prominent journalist Andrzej Poczobut has been released from jail in Belarus in a swap with Poland that also saw a total of 10 prisoners released, officials said on Tuesday.
Andrzej Poczobut was imprisoned solely for the fact that he spoke the truth. We sympathized with him because this is recent memory for us. For 45 years in this country under communism, people went to jail for simply speaking the truth, no other crime. And so he became a symbol.
Poczobut is a correspondent for the Polish newspaper Gazeta Wyborcza and a leading figure among Belarus' Polish minority. He was serving 8 years in prison in a case condemned as politically motivated. His arrest in 2021 drew widespread criticism from Europe. The exchanges saw Poland release a jailed Russian archaeologist, Alexander Butyadzin, who was wanted by Ukraine. The prisoner swap came as Belarus President Alexander Lukashenko sought improved relations with the West. In March, Lukashenko ordered the release of 250 political prisoners as part of a deal with Washington that lifted some US sanctions. French President and co-prince of Andorra, Emmanuel Macron, has called for the debate on decriminalizing abortion to move forward in Andorra during his visit of the microstates. Alongside the Vatican, the Principality of Andorra is the only European country to completely ban abortion, even in case of rape, incest, danger to the mother, or fetal abnormality.
Votre gouvernement a fait une proposition d'avancée. Elle me paraît proportionnée. Et avançant sur la dépénalisation pour les femmes, elle va sur ce chemin. De là où je suis, sans préempter vos débats à venir, je souhaite avec affection que ce débat progresse.
Women in Andorra face up to 6 months in prison for having abortion. Doctors who perform them face up to 3 years in prison and a 5-year ban on practicing. In March, the head of the Andorran government, Xavier Espot Zamora, said he was hoping he could decriminalize abortion within a year, yet without legalizing it.
The European Parliament on Tuesday approved a resolution calling for an EU-wide definition of rape based on the absence of freely given and informed consent. The resolution urges that only a clear, affirmative, freely given and unambiguous indication of consent is valid in sexual relations. It adds that silence, a lack of verbal or physical resistance, or the absence of a no cannot be interpreted as consent. Any sexual act outside this framework should be considered rape. Lack of consent is already a defining element of rape or sexual assault in 17 EU member states, according to the European Parliament Research Service. However, legislation in several member states still relies on a force-based definition of rape, requiring victims to prove violence or threats. Supporters of the resolution argue that recent cases have exposed the limits of force-based definitions. Speaking to Euronews, Abir al-Salani pointed to cases in France involving drugging and online abuse as evidence of evolving forms of sexual violence.
Because of all these scandals that have been surrounding this topic, from the case of Madame Pilico in France to the so-called rape academy, where you drug women, where the partners drug women, they rape them and they streamed it online. So the violence has evolved against women. Sexual violence in Europe has evolved.
It is now up to the European Commission to propose legislation, which would then need to be approved by EU member states.
An 89-year-old suspected gunman has been arrested after opening fire at a social security office and a courthouse in central Athens on Tuesday, wounding several people. Police said a suspect armed with a shotgun initially opened fire at the National Social Security Fund office in the center of the Greek capital, wounding an employee. Police officers who arrived at the scene treated the man, but the gunman fled the scene. The same man was suspected of later opening fire on the ground floor of the Court of Appeals building in another part of Athens. Several people were also wounded there, police said, adding that authorities had found the shotgun. He was located hours later in a hotel in Patras, 215 kilometers south of Athens. The motive for the shooting was unclear. State broadcaster ERT said the gunman had reportedly thrown envelopes with documents onto the floor after the shooting at the courthouse, saying those were the reasons for his actions.
Qatar says it continues to back Pakistan's ongoing efforts to broker a deal between the United States and Iran. This comes as Gulf leaders gather in Saudi Arabia on Tuesday for their first face-to-face meeting since the war began, with the escalating standoff over the Strait of Hormuz high on the agenda. Qatar says the Gulf states are engaging with everyone now for the reopening of the strait. In Doha, Foreign Ministry spokesperson Dr. Majid Al-Ansari says Qatar is pushing for a wide-ranging deal to end the war, adding that using a critical maritime choke point as a political bargaining chip is unacceptable.
We want a comprehensive deal that would address the interests of all the peoples in the region, including the Iranians and our people, and the concerns of the international community regarding Iran. We also know that peace is incremental. Any deal that would, first of all, maintain the ceasefire, which is a positive trajectory for us.
Answering a question from Euronews, Al-Ansari also confirmed Doha's participation in the UK and France-led talks on the opening of the Strait of Hormuz.
We're supportive of all and every international effort that would lead to a diplomatic solution and that would lead to the opening of the strait and to securing the strait in the future. But we are still in preliminary talks, of course, with all these partners, with our regional partners. But we applaud our partners in Europe for taking the lead on this. And as I said, we attended, represented by our Minister of State, and we are continuing to engage with them on that. However, we have made it very clear that we will not be used as political punching bags in this war, that any attack on our sovereignty cannot be justified by any means, and we have taken all the necessary precautions to make sure that we are safe from this aggression that has come to our country.
Al-Ansari says there is no need to expand the circle of negotiations, and Qatar continues to support Pakistan-led mediation efforts. Adil Halim, Euronews, Doha.
Europe's first complete lithium mine begins operating in Sivajärvi in western Finland. The strategic resource is critical for manufacturing modern electronics. At a cost of around €783 million, Project Keliber was mainly funded by South African mining giant Sibanye Stillwater and the European Union. Hanu Hotala, CEO of Keliber, explains the full production chain to produce battery-quality lithium.
We are now extracting spodumene ore. It contains some 1 to 1.3% lithium oxide. Then we transport it to the concentrator, and there the lithium oxide content is increased to 5%. And further to lithium refinery, and there the lithium concentrate is produced as a battery quality lithium hydroxide.
Meanwhile, locals from a nearby town say they have mixed feelings about the mine, as they recognise it is good for employment but worry about the environmental impact. The Calibre project covers more than 500 square kilometres and 6 other mining sites are planned in the area. Some compare the role of lithium nowadays to the role that oil played at the start of the 20th century.
A 21-year-old man accused of plotting to attack one of Taylor Swift's concerts in Vienna in August 2024 pleaded guilty as his trial began in Austria on Tuesday. The plot was thwarted, but Austrian authorities still cancelled Swift's 3 performances in Vienna as part of her Eras tour. The Austrian man, named only as Baron A., pleaded guilty to the charges related to the concert plot and to being a member of a terrorist organization. He allegedly networked with members of the jihadist group Islamic State ahead of the planned attack. In 2024, authorities said the suspect had hoped to kill as many people as possible and were given U.S. intelligence that led to the decision to cancel the concerts. He allegedly planned to target onlookers outside the Ernst Happel Stadium, where up to 30,000 people were expected to gather each night, along with 65,000 inside the venue. Baron A's defense attorney said he deeply regrets his actions. If convicted, he could face up to 20 years in prison.